we're now going to have a brief panel discussion with the speakers from the previous talks. David Telford, the head of AgriFood at KTN, is my co-chair for this session. So I'd like to invite Shobhita, Soor, Michael, Joshua Ogendo, Miha, Pipan, and Sandra Hill to turn on their videos and their volumes to join us in the conversation. Brilliant. Welcome all. Thank you for joining us today. We've heard a huge amount about challenges and opportunities in the last couple of talks, and definitely a lot about innovation. I'm going to pose a question to one person and then open it to everyone else to contribute if they'd like to add something. So my first question is to Shobhita, and really it's a big question on how can innovation within the sector be better supported globally?
Sure. Yeah, I think, you know, so I think that having good collaborations across the public and private sector can be really helpful. So, for example, some of the things that my team and I are really interested in is the larva oil. You know, what are the properties of that? What are the benefits of that? There's a lot of research right now on probiotics and prebiotics from so many other foods. So looking at that application in insects and it would be really helpful for the marketing, would be really helpful for even product formulation, because then you could, you know, pair the palm weevil larva that might have a probiotic or prebiotic with sort of a complementary source. So I think really increasing the knowledge base around the nutritional information, protein digestibility is another one. So these examples really require, you know, very sophisticated equipment, a lot of technical expertise, which not all, you know, insect companies have. And I think a lot of the nutrition science, food science, public actors can really contribute to that.
Does anyone else have anything to add to that question?
For me, one of the great things which would be helpful is a better understanding of what the legislation might be for the insects in feeds and foods. And I think it comes a little bit out of what Shobhita is actually saying, you know, because we still don't quite have the information on some of the positive nutrients, but also the anti-nutrients which might be in the insects. You're worried about developing something which then may not be acceptable into the market through legislation. So as the big question, that's what it is. Can we have some idea about what the legislation might be for, you know, the different types of insects for foods and feeds, and that will allow a lot of people to get on a bit faster, I think.
Okay, maybe for me, Joanna, what I would like to say, it all depends on which insects you are talking about. Especially if you're talking about the African continent, certain insects are known to be edible and people have lived with them for ages. For example, if you're talking about the locusts and insects like those ones, you don't need serious legislation to overcome their use, say, in Africa. Now, the best thing that we need to do is for us to demonstrate through empirical information that actually should actually reach the heart of the investors. The most critical is the investors to pick up. That is my take.
Great, thank you. David, do you have our next question?
Yeah, thanks, Joanna. It's a question for Sandra Hill. And hi, Sandra. I know you've been working on a UK-Africa collaboration, and we'd just like to ask you, what do you see as common innovation needs across the UK and Africa?
Well, it's where you're pitching your innovation. And like everything else, it's not because it's the UK or nor is it Africa. You need to decide what you're doing, because if you're going into a very commercial situation, large city type work, then it is very different than if you're doing dealing with rural UK or rural Africa. So we spent quite a lot of time trying to find what was considered to be natural for Africa. And again, you can't divide, well, we found in Nigeria, and Joshua know better than I will, we couldn't divide it into Africa would eat locusts or Africa would do this. It was very specific to specific areas within the country. So you do have to understand what is going on. And again, you know, for me, it's big industry or small local development, very different policies and very different innovative traits that you would need.
Great, thanks, Sandra. Does anyone else like to comment about that? No, that's okay. We can move on to the next question. So back to you, Joanna.
Yeah, so my next question is really, I think, building on the same topic around transferring innovation between geographies. If we are saying there is such significant differences, how can we approach sharing knowledge and sharing innovations? I think I'll ask that first to Michael. I know you're looking to expand. How are you approaching that?
Yeah, great question, Joanna. Now, in terms of in the local context, in the African context within which you operate, and by African, I'm saying Nairobi as well as, Kenya as well as other African countries, the legislation around the feeding of waste to insects is not that tightly regulated compared to Europe. Yeah, so it means that regulations allow us to be able to transfer technology into other African countries with the approval, if you like, to be able to distribute the end products into the consumer market. Yeah. Now, I think transferring our technology, for example, of BSF into Europe, into Africa is possible. But now, if you're looking to transfer that into Europe and North America, then things start to change. Yeah. Where I think in Europe, especially, everything fed into animals has got to be made using pre-consumer feeds. Yeah. So it means your cost structures change. Also, when you look at things like climate. So BSF, for example, like warm climates, for them to be able to reproduce very well. Yeah. So it basically means then you're looking at things like climate control at a much greater level of automation than what we have in Nairobi. Yeah. Now, that basically fundamentally changes your designs, and basically means that you require significantly more capex to be able to operate in Europe than able to operate in Nairobi. Yeah. So I think expansion must be contextualized with regards to regulation, climate, as well as the market that you'll have in those areas. And yeah, hope that answers your question.
Well, I might add a few thoughts on that as well. I think Michael very much nailed it there in terms of the technology that's actually used and in terms of the level of automation it requires. It will be fit for the particular geography it's developed in. So, for example, for us, it's been very much, reducing all the labor requirement when it comes to DX1, but that might be completely different if you're talking about rural location where that's not a limiting factor. But I certainly think that when we talk about processes and best practices, which are, oftentimes just linked to the biology of the particular insect, and I understand most about the black soldier fly here, those are things that we can work on transferring better. So, for example, there were a few questions today about, the safety of the processing and what you have to achieve. I mean, if something needs to hit 90 degrees Celsius, it's going to have to happen either in Cambridge or, in Africa. Like, it's not a difference from that perspective. And I wish there was more of that sharing, but to sort of highlight, why I think some of this is not happening is the fact is this industry is still quite young. Most of the companies in this area, are under 10 years old. And there's this massive drive for kind of IP accumulation and trade secrets and all sorts of things that does put a lot of sort of innovators in a position where even though you want to share it. Some of these things are difficult to share from an investment perspective. So I think as that kind of runs aside, as companies grow, as they reach scale and those things become more widespread and known, there'll be a better opportunity to share best practices globally.
Thank you. I think that probably feeds on really nicely to the next question that we wanted to pose. David.
Yeah, thanks, Joanna. It's back to you, Miha. So it's great to see how you've grown in recent years and you've really scaled the company. And we've known you for a few years, and it's really impressive what you've done. We've got a lot of new people on the call and in the event today interested to get into the sector. And I'd just like to ask you, what advice would you give to a new innovator entering the sector?
Focus. Focus would be my, seasoned entrepreneurial advice for anyone willing to get into this industry. I mean, it's a fantastic sector. It's bound to grow. I mean, we're always going to need food. We're always going to have waste. So if we can put that into a circular system, which is currently missing, despite what everyone might be saying, it's missing by and large, we'll be in a good position. But focus in terms of like the market segment you're planning to service or the products you're willing to make. And I'm saying this as someone who has learned this the hard way of trying a lot of different things and then ending up having to focus somewhere. And since when we've done that, it's really allowed us to grow and expand. And ultimately that will enable kind of addressing all of these other opportunities in the future, I hope.
Brilliant, thanks, Miha. And would anyone else like to comment at all on that question?
Maybe I'll say a little. I'm not in the private, but somehow I understand the process of what it takes to be an innovator. Now, I would wish, and I'm happy that Miha has already opened the space for other innovators to join him. The first thing to do is to allow any innovative mind to grow and be ready to take risk. Let them be risk takers. That is one. And somebody who is just coming into the platform as an innovator may not necessarily think so much about a lot of market research. Because innovation is on innovation. You are supposed to be driven through process of trial and error until you get something that you call an innovation. And I would believe that whatever you come up with should be unique, and you have all that it takes to allow you to take the risk. It's only that when you are taking the risk against the big muscles in the market already, those ones who are already in the market, it might be a big challenge. But the best is I advise them to be ready to take risk and don't shy away from facing competition. Research will follow once you are already in the market.
Brilliant. Thanks, Joshua. That's really interesting. And I think Joanna's got the next question for you as well. So I'll hand back to Joanna.
Yeah, so I think my next question is really on collaboration. So what advice would we give to those trying to build collaborations within the sector? Joshua, maybe we could start with you on that one.
I think that is a very good question that I would want maybe to weigh in, especially for us who are coming from academia, but would wish to see things happen. Now, one area of collaboration that needs to be strengthened and needs to be emphasized is what I would call innovators to actually have direct link with the industry, if industrial players are willing to work with such innovators together. And in places where incubation centers are available, that would be the starting point where the young innovators are supposed to be mentored, and strong linkages need to be established so that they are able to actually interact with the industry, so that strong partnerships can allow them to grow. Now, for us, the kind of partnerships that we forged and we are weak with industry, and that's why this platform is good for me, We are very good at, say, academia versus academia collaborations. Academia collaborating with maybe the farming communities, but academia industry collaboration is a weak link that would wish to be strengthened. And I'm happy that KTN UK has created this platform, and people listening needs to open up and allow this to grow. Thank you.
I think that's probably a great place for us to finish this panel session, with the encouragement to open up and to find a collaboration through this session.